difference is that you can apply this to any arbitrary weapon, any arbitrary location, and there's about 1 million options as well.
And committed Ukraine and their words to deepen cooperation with NATO.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 25 cable stations from Vermont to New York City. On the internet at thestruggle.org. Our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. During the 50s and 60s, civil defense would send out booklets with maps about the effects of nuclear weapons. It was an attempt to get everyone to build nuclear shelters in their basements. It traumatized a whole generation, myself included. Once the Soviet Union collapsed, it seemed that the threat of nuclear war had miraculously disappeared. Yet now, in 2015, it's raised its ugly head again, as the U.S. and Russia may be going toe-to-toe. NATO held a military exercise in Estonia just a few hundred yards from Russia. The real flashpoint, though, is Ukraine, with the U.S. trying to make it part of NATO, and Russia seizing Crimea and encouraging separatists in the east. It was very timely then for Helen Caldicott, the Australian doctor who gave up her career to warn the world about nuclear weapons, to hold a conference about those weapons in New York City. We'll open the show with part of the interview I did with her, and we'll have video of other speakers, including Noam Chomsky. Helen Caldicott is a Gandhi Peace Award winner and part of a group whose international organization was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in the early 80s. She's written a number of books, including Nuclear Power is Not the Answer. Helen Caldicott, I heard the interview you did with Harvey Wasserman talking about Ukraine and Chernobyl, which has sort of gone from public interest, perhaps. But there's fighting in Ukraine. 5,000 have died. Who is tending the store, 100 miles from Kiev?
Well, it's not just Chernobyl, and of course much of the Ukraine is extremely radioactive, and there are many areas that are unlivable. No one can live there. But it's not just Chernobyl. It's the fact that there are 15 very large nuclear power plants in the Ukraine, that any of which could be destroyed during a war, with conventional weapons, cut off of the external electricity supply, which could cause a meltdown. So it's a very tenuous, very scary situation from a nuclear perspective.
Can I ask about Chernobyl? There's such a controversy about how many people who have died. You know, the IAEA, if I got the initials right, will say a couple thousand, okay. And the others say 1 million.
The IAEA's mission is to promote nuclear power, number one. Number two, WHO, World Health Organization, signed a contract in 1959 with the IAEA saying that they would not investigate any atomic or nuclear accidents without the permission of the IAEA. So they haven't. They're totally compromised. They've never investigated Chernobyl. And they have not investigated Fukushima. The figures of over 1 million people come from on-the-ground data collection. No one else has done it except the Russians and others in those areas, epidemiologists, physicians, scientists and the like. 5,000 papers were translated from Slavic into English and published by the New York Academy of Sciences, and it's well over 1 million now. It's one of the most fascinating and horrifying medical books I've ever read, and we're still learning every day about what radiation does to people. That's the truth.
At the conference, Alex Wellerstein talked about an interactive web page that he has created that allows you to see the various zones of annihilation and destruction caused by a nuclear explosion superimposed over Google Maps. First, when you use it, it's very interesting. But when you put those circles around places you know or your hometown, it's chilling. And that is the point, to make it personal, to try to break through the carefree attitude we have towards nuclear weapons. Here's a Hiroshima-sized bomb exploded in eastern Ukraine. Now here's one over London. The numbers of dead and injured are shown at the right. And here's the same bomb over Lower Manhattan.
When you open up the site, it will try to find the largest city near to you and put that as the immediate first target. So if I were doing this, I teach in Hoboken, which is right there on the other side of the water, and it will target New York when you open it up. If you're doing this in Berkeley, it will target San Francisco. If you were doing this in a suburb of Houston, it will target Houston. The goal is for it to pick a plausible nuclear target that is someplace that people have been. And by the way, this works in all countries too. It's not just the United States. And so obviously for our students in Hoboken, Manhattan is the clear site. So we've had the target reticule is set to Midtown Manhattan. So the first thing we do is select the size of the bomb. There are a lot of preset options from both historical and present-day weapons, and even hypothetical ones, like a hypothetical nuclear terrorist bomb. So just for the first demonstration, I just want to show you the first nuclear bomb, the Trinity test. This is, what they call the gadget, 20,000 tons of TNT. It's the 70th anniversary of its detonation this summer. So we pick it, that will select the yield, in this case 20 kilotons, and then we click detonate, and this is what we will see. So the rings here are pretty familiar to people who are used to nuclear literature. They correspond to different zones of effects. And you're thinking, yes, well, isn't this the kind of thing we made during the Cold War? Yeah. The difference is that you can apply this to any arbitrary weapon, any arbitrary location, and there's a million options as well. So all of this is done on the fly in the web browser. Even the height of the bomb can be adjusted, and different effects can be mapped. If we scroll down a little bit on the right, the legend explains what each of these zones correspond to. So the orange ring at the very center is the size of the fireball itself, which is already pretty large. The red ring is an area of total destruction, so it's about 20 pounds per square inch of overpressure. The gray ring is enough destruction to destroy any light or civilian building, so 5 pounds per square inch. The green ring shows 500 rem or 5 sievert, which is fatal for most people, and even often fatal with medical attention. And the orange ring shows the range of third-degree burns, and is also a good proxy for thinking about where combustible materials would be. So you can see that this is already doing quite a lot, but we can do more. There's also a button there that says casualties. So if we click that button and click detonate, it'll come up with estimates for how many dead and how many injured. So what it's doing here is running off a population density database that sits on the back end on the server, and it's applying some scaling laws that are derived from these government calculations. And so in this case, with our 20 kiloton bomb dropped on Midtown Manhattan, we have killed an estimated 325,000 people and have inflicted injuries on almost 400,000 more. There are issues with these calculation codes, the very back of the envelope. There's some ways in which they might underestimate things, there's some ways in which they might overestimate things. But I think as an order of magnitude estimate, they're a pretty good place to start thinking about this sort of thing. So when I show the students this, I point out to them that sometimes they're kind of amazed that not everybody is dead. So we're over here in Hoboken again, up there. We get our windows blown out, but otherwise we're doing okay. And they say, oh, this is great, these bombs aren't so bad. And then I say, well, what if your friends are in the city that day, right? It's an awful lot of people. This is way more people that died in 9/11, things of that nature. But these kind of early bombs, these relatively crude ones, they kind of punch out the center of a downtown, which is more or less what happens at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So all right, we can also do other things with this though. We can select another weapon from this list. We can scale it up to the first hydrogen bomb, which is about 10 million tons of TNT from 1952. So keeping in mind now what the 20 kiloton bomb looks like on Manhattan, let's go out to the 10 megaton bomb. And so if we were doing this from the website itself, it would dramatically zoom out, and then all those numbers would tally up on the right. It's a pretty dramatic effect. And the students, again, these are undergraduates, college students, they want to seem cool, they want to seem aloof. They almost universally let out a gasp, just, which is so great. It's so great to hear. That's how you know you're getting through to them, right? When they're involuntarily making noises they would be embarrassed about making. And so I'm pretty pleased with that. So with a hydrogen bomb, by contrast, completely obliterates the island of Manhattan, completely wrecks destruction across all 5 boroughs. Hoboken is gone on this map. It does not exist anymore. We've killed over 3.5 million people and injured another 3.2 million. So these are numbingly large numbers. This is a bomb that even Robert Oppenheimer, who always defended Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he thought this was a weapon of genocide. But again, we don't have to stop there. This just shows you the acute prompt effects of the bombs and the casualties. There's a little checkbox up at the upper right for showing radioactive fallout, the radioactive contamination. So we'll turn that on, click detonate, and you see the beginnings of the familiar contour, the amount of radiation caused downwind of the blast. This fallout model was again taken from government-derived models so that they could understand their own weapons effects. And it creates an area downwind, the dark red part of it, which is about 1,000 rads an hour, which would be, so that's fatal after a half an hour. That's an area of some 10.5 thousand square kilometers. And even greater areas are for dangerous and contaminating fallout. So this is actually an area so large that we have to zoom out to see how large it goes. So this one bomb not only takes out the entire New York City metro area, but produces fatal levels of radioactive debris as far north as Boston. And radioactive contamination goes even into Canada. So again, this is what Oppenheimer called a weapon of genocide and useful actual warfare.
These virtual nuclear bombs have been detonated over 43 million times. In the real world, President Obama has abandoned his anti-nuclear promises and is engaged in spending tens of billions to modernize our nuclear bombs. Now the legendary writer and activist, Noam Chomsky.
Well, as all of us are all too well aware, a few weeks ago the famous doomsday clock was advanced by 3 minutes towards midnight. That's a threat level that had not been reached for 30 years. The accompanying statement invoked the two major threats to survival, nuclear weapons and unchecked climate change. The call condemned world leaders who are endangering every person on Earth by failing to perform their most important duty, ensuring and preserving the health and vitality of human civilization. This grim declaration naturally brought to mind another one just 50 years ago, the appeal to the people of the world by Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein, calling on them to face a choice that is stark and dreadful and inescapable. Shall we put an end to the human race, or shall mankind renounce war? Recognizing, of course, that the war can quickly turn into terminal nuclear war. The Russell-Einstein appeal differs from the current declaration in 2 crucial respects. It did not include the threat of environmental catastrophe, which was then not sufficiently understood. And it addresses the people of the world, not the political leadership. And that difference is of some importance. There is substantial evidence that on climate change, nuclear weapons planning, international policies generally, the population in general seems more concerned than the political leadership. It's hardly a secret that even the most free and democratic societies, governments respond only in very limited ways to popular will. For the United States, it's well established in academic scholarship that a considerable majority of the population is literally disenfranchised at the lower end of the income wealth scale. Their opinions have no influence on policy. Influence increases slowly as one moves up the scale, and at the very top, which is actually a fraction of 1%, the policy is pretty much determined. That being the case, the attitudes at the very top of the ladder are of quite considerable significance. These are revealed dramatically in a poll of CEOs that was released a few weeks ago at the Davos conference, conference of the masters of the universe, as the business press describes them. The poll revealed that climate change did not merit inclusion among the top 19 risks that concern CEOs. Nuclear weapons were not even mentioned. We're still at the top of the perceived risks was regulation. That is the prime device for addressing environmental catastrophe. Their overriding concern was growth prospects for their companies. What happened when the Cold War ended provides instructive lessons into its actual nature. One question has to do with the fate of NATO, now that the alleged threat of Russian invasion had disappeared. Mikhail Gorbachev agreed to allow a unified Germany to join NATO. Again, a rather significant concession, but with a quid pro quo, that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. That's the phrase that was used in internal high-level discussions referring to East Germany. NATO at once expanded to East Germany. Gorbachev objected, but he was informed by the United States that there were only verbal commitments, nothing in writing. Clinton later expanded NATO to the borders of Russia. As we read a few days ago, NATO U.S. armored vehicles are a couple hundred yards from the Russian border in military exercises. As John Mearsheimer recently pointed out in Foreign Affairs, indications that Ukraine might be assimilated into the Western system, possibly even into NATO, could not fail to be threatening to any Russian leader. Last December, the Western-backed Ukrainian parliament voted 303 to 8 to rescind the policy of non-alignment, which had been adopted by the ousted president, and committed Ukraine, in their words, to deepen cooperation with NATO in order to achieve the criteria required for membership in this organization. The growing crisis concerning Ukraine is of no slight threat. In the midst of these world-threatening developments, Russia's early warning systems, which are quite primitive as compared with ours, detected an incoming missile strike from the United States that sent the highest level alert. The officer on duty, Stanislav Petrov, decided that it was a false alarm and did not follow protocol. He did not transmit the warnings. That's the difference between life and death. Yesterday, Max Tegmark mentioned another crucial case, 20 years earlier, the Russian submarine commander, Vasily Archipov, blocked the launching of nuclear-tipped torpedoes. This is in the middle of the missile crisis. They could have set off, that could have set off a terminal nuclear war. He blocked it. But we should remember that Russian protocol required that 3 commanders agreed to set off the missiles. 2 of them agreed. One, Archipov, disagreed. That's why we're alive. That's one sign of how thin the thread is by which we hang over the abyss.
More video from the forum on nuclear weapons in our next week's show. Here are some still photos that Code Pink took during its protest outside the D.C. hall where AIPAC, part of the Israel lobby, was holding its convention, just days before Netanyahu gave his speech to Congress demanding war with Iran. Of course, he didn't say that in his words exactly, but that's the result of his advice. That's what it would be. His ever-growing demands that Iran give up every part of its nuclear power program and it stop supporting Shia Muslims in the Middle East. Most of Congress was rapturous as usual. However, Jewish Voice for Peace, Code Pink, and the U.S. campaign against the occupation mounted a skip the speech movement that pried 60 members of Congress away from the event. See our website for links, among other things that expose the lies of Netanyahu and that connects to Jon Stewart's hilarious attack on the speech and Obama's wimpy defense of his own actions. Talia, you are working on a project in North Haven, your old hometown, about the mascot of the teams in the town. Explain.
So our mascot is the Indians, and we've been that since like the 50s or something, and it's just incredibly harmful and racist, and there's so much research as to why on a national level this hurts Native American youth and just fills into a stereotype, as well as hurting people specifically in North Haven.
Now, I could understand Redskins,
Yeah.
because, that's vile, it referred to the killing of Indians and the blood and all that other stuff. But why just the word Indian? Some people say, well, it honors Indians. It says that Indians are brave and fierce, and isn't that good?
Well, it's, for starters, it's a misappropriation, because the Indians, isn't actually their, name. They're Native Americans and Indians because of Christopher Columbus and whatnot. And then also going off of that, the whole sort of stereotype of the Indian and the the whole idea of that is that they're these aggressive and warlike savages that just they can fight and they have such strength, and that's what sports teams want to use for their games and whatnot. But that's a one-dimensional caricature image of this entire race of people, and it allows for the appropriation of people to wear feather headdresses and just take for granted these sacred religious symbols.
And of course, there is no such thing as Indians. It's many, many nations, and the whites came up with this word thinking they were in the Indies. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Also, another thing with the problem with the term Indians is that it's such a blanket term, kind of like you were saying, because there's so many different tribes throughout the nation that have very specific practices and religious beliefs very specific to them, and so just using the term Indians gets rid of all of that.
Now, people are going to ask, are you one of a descendant from an Indian nation yourself?
No, I'm not.
And does that make a difference?
No, not at all. I think it's important for all different groups of people, race, ethnicity, gender, sex, to stand in solidarity with each other on the basic principle that all humans deserve respect and dignity.
So what exactly are you working on in North Haven? Who are you approaching?
The Board of Education.
And what date?
March 12th at 6:30 at the Patricia K. Brozak Theater, which is also the auditorium in the high school.
And how about the street, if people want to come?
221 Elm Street.
And you're encouraging all sorts of people, or just people from North Haven to attend this Board of Ed meeting?
Anyone to come. All people should come to try and support this.
And there's a Facebook page. People can sign a petition about this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you go to, the Facebook event is called Bringing the Change the Mascot petition to the Board of Education. And on that page, there's a link to the actual petition to sign it. And it says information about like how we're going to the Board of Ed and whatnot.
And how would you find that page on Facebook?
If you just like type it into the search bar, you should be able to find it.
And one last one. What is the name of the event again?
Oh, sorry. Bringing the Change the Mascot petition to the Board of Education.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Sebi Medina-Tayac. I'm a member of the Piscataway Indian Nation from Maryland. I've lived in Connecticut for 3 years now, and we're here at the Native American Cultural Center. The North Haven Indian mascot is pretty ridiculous that we're even debating about it right now. I would challenge viewers to look at the North Haven Indian mascot and look at myself. I'm someone who grew up in an Indian community with Indian culture, but do I look anything like the North Haven Indian mascot? Does anyone here look anything like the North Haven Indian mascot? It's a huge generalization of what Native people look like, phenotypically, culturally, the way they dress, the way they act. We are not merely plains. They're a ridiculous generalization of the plains warrior. In fact, in Connecticut, people didn't even dress or look like that at all. So it's inaccurate, it's offensive, and it's a huge generalization that honors absolutely no one, if for no other reason that it's ridiculously, historically, and sociologically inaccurate.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.